Hello and welcome to my review for episode 2 of Blue Planet 2, which is The Deep. So we start off in Antarctica, where we spend quite a bit of time talking about how no one's dove into the deep ocean at this particular part of the world. And we see the submersibles and we see them basically, submerging into the deep ocean. It does help to create an air of exploration. You do feel like we are really exploring this habitat more so than we have in other series. I feel like usually we just say, oh, it's kind of weird, we're going to go in there. This one, it's like, no, this is new territory, we're going in. It does create a tone which I think is kept up throughout the rest of the episode. So from there we enter the Twilight Zone. That's the kind of first area where we're in the deep ocean, I suppose. And here you get a lot of weird things. You get this cockeyed squid, a squid where one of its eyes kind of pokes upwards, so it's constantly seeing up and a below. Quite weird. The barrel eye as well has a translucent head, so it can actually see through its head. Crazy. The animal we spend the most amount of time with in the Twilight Zone is the Humboldt squid. The Humboldt squid are great. We've seen them before and they're the most recognisable animal in this episode by a mile. Everything you know about Humboldt squid is kind of represented in this episode. You know they're really aggressive, really violent. We know they cannibalise each other. That's all in this sequence. Them attacking the fish is great, but then when they run out of fish, they attack each other. We see them squabbling over other squid. It's great. It does create an air of lawlessness. You feel like this is kind of like the Wild West down here. These animals don't really abide by the laws that we would consider, normal for the surface. Then we enter the Midnight Zone, the next phase of the deep ocean, and here we see again more weird stuff. We talk a bit about bioluminescence. We see how, again, the bioluminescence looks great. Everything in this episode looks amazing. I will repeat that throughout this video, I'm sure, but it does look great. Again, we see the fang tooth again. We saw that in Blue Planet. Again, pretty cool. Siphonophores, these bioluminescent things, they're like basically immortal. The sea snow looks great as well. Again, it just looks good. And then we see that it hits the ocean floor. And that's where we spend the rest of the episode. We don't muck about too long. We don't spend a lot of time diving. It does follow a case of, right, we know this isn't the first deep sea episode you've seen. And in all those episodes, we spend quite a lot of time getting to the bottom of the ocean. Now, we've got the technology to properly explore that habitat, so let's just get there. And that's what they do. We do see some weird stuff there on the sort of ocean floor, like the sea toad, which is a fish that's basically got legs. The most impressive animal we see on the ocean floor, though, is the six-gill shark. And it's great. I mean, they really do a good job of making this seem like an impressive animal. We talk about how big it is. It's the size of a great white shark. And we basically see eating a whale carcass. We spend quite a lot of time with the whale carcass, to be honest. The whale carcass sequence in this episode is my favourite in any series. I don't think it's been topped. It just blew everything that came before it out of the water. And there was one in every single deep sea episode up to this point. And I don't know how it can be topped, really. It's great. The six-gill sharks are pretty important to that. We see they're the first to move in when the whale carcass hits the floor. And again, one appears, it starts tearing into the carcass. Again, in great detail, the shots we get of the six-gill shark feeding on the whale carcass are amazing. And then all these other sharks come in and they start fighting each other. The fights between them are great. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. It really did feel like a clash of the titans because we know how big they are. And again, even them feeding on the whale, it feels really just impressive. There's like a lot of blood in the water. There's blood actually coming out their gills, like they're almost breathing in the blood and breathing out. Really, again, haunting, but really good as well. And when the sharks eventually leave, we see all these other things come in, the crabs, these scabbard fish, which eat all the small organisms that are eating the whale carcass. The sound effects with them are great because it's almost like shattering glass. It's quite cool. And again, as before, we've seen everything that eats the whale carcass. The zombie worms that basically feed on the bones. All good stuff. Again, we spend quite a lot of time on that. And the whole thing's great. I really, really like it. Then we see deep sea coral. It's not something we think of very often. We do talk about how they're under threat, how a lot of fishermen are actually dredging the deep ocean, so these corals are getting destroyed. Pretty sad. What's really effective about that is you see this area that's been almost completely dredged, and there's one tiny little bit of white coral that really stands out. It's really quite effective, I think. It's quite haunting. And then we get this really weird sponge. It's called the Venus flower basket, and inside it's got these two shrimp that have basically floated in when they were really young. Now they're really big, they can't get out. They live their entire lives in these sponges, and they reproduce, and they feed. They live for quite a long time, it seems. And it's really good. Again, it almost feels like a really weird, tragic love story almost, the way it's kind of portrayed. It's quite good. I came away from this episode thinking, nah, I like that. Then we go to this really weird habitat, which we also saw in Blue Planet, which was the brine lake. It's the same one we saw in Blue Planet, but again here, better shots, more in depth. The kind of vibe of this show in general. It's brilliant. I mean, we explore the animals that live on the side, all these mussels that rely on the nutrients. The eels going in is really good. We get a really good view of how toxic this brine lake is. I don't think that's something that we really dealt with in Blue Planet. You see this eel going into toxic shock. It's really quite creepy. You do feel like this is probably one of the most inhospitable habitats on Earth. And it's just really good. Again, you just feel like you're watching something really unique, really cool stuff. We see deep sea canyons. A lot of that isn't actually filmed; it's produced through graphics, but it looks really cool. Again, you see a lot of animals down there, like all these weird starfish, weird crabs, sea slugs mostly. Again, animals that really can only survive at this pressure. And we even see a fish. We see the ethereal snailfish, which was discovered, I believe, during the filming of this. And again, it's really impressive that this is something no one expected. It's kind of hard to imagine a fish being able to survive at these depths. And invertebrates, maybe not vertebrates. So really cool. Again, I thought it was really good as well. We talk about this mountain range, the mid-ocean ridge, which spans the entire globe. Really cool. Again, I didn't know about that. And we see all the deep sea vents, and we talk about how that's probably where life evolved. Again, probably true, yeah, and really impressive as well. We spend more time there than I probably thought we would. Again, we see all the weird animals that live there. And while it's really diverse, it's very concentrated. Everything's kind of within the same area. It's very crammed. And there's that one deep sea vent in the Atlantic, which is kind of how we end the episode. And it's great as well. We talk about how it's producing hydrocarbons, which again was the foundations of all life on Earth. And how we know that there's oceans on moons of Saturn, moons of Jupiter, I believe. And again, we know there's a deep ocean there. And if they're producing hydrocarbons in the same way that we are on Earth, it's entirely possible that there's life there. This episode felt very alien, and it felt like proper exploration. And I think the fact that you see the submersibles a lot throughout the episode really does make you feel like you're exploring it with them, which I think makes for a really good viewing experience. The music's also great. I forgot to talk about it in the last video. The music throughout the first episode's amazing. It's also great here. It's just very haunting and very just weird. Yeah, and the diaries is all about the people diving. You really see how dangerous it is to film in the deep ocean, and not necessarily always for the most obvious ones. The bit where you see the water getting into the submersible, that's kind of probably in your mind. You don't think about icebergs clashing together and rocks falling on you. That just wouldn't even enter my mind. A lot of the stuff in this episode was filmed by Gavin Thurston, who's quite a relatively well-known wildlife cameraman. He's worked on all this stuff. He does talk about a lot of this stuff in his book, which I'd really recommend reading. Journeys in the Wild, really good book, definitely worth checking out. It's really good. So yeah, this episode, fantastic. I mean, it's great. I think I do prefer it to the last episode, even though I love that one. Yes, it's a really good episode. Highlights, I mean, probably the whale carcass, specifically the six-gill sharks, is probably the highlight. The shrimp I liked, but I pretty much liked everything, to be honest. It's really hard to pick a best bit. Yeah, so what were your highlights if you had one, or did you just like the whole thing? Let me know in the comments below. Next week I'll be doing the coral reef episode. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And yeah, I'll see you next week, and goodbye.